I'm Alexandria Kenyon, spiritual mentor and your host of Conscious Connection, a podcast where we create space for humanness within spiritual development. Me and my When She Feels Like It co-host, Kimber Klein, are giving you a real behind-the-scenes look of what it is actually like to be on a spiritual development path. We will talk with coaches, healers, and other spiritual leaders who are making impact, as well as our clients who will share their real-life experience as they practice owning their intuitive gifts. Stick around for unfiltered conversations that may or may not poke fun at New Age spirituality, giving you permission to show up imperfectly human. Hey you, glad you're here. Welcome back to Conscious Connection, the podcast, episode 3. I'm your host, Alexandria Kenyon, here today with special guest Brandon Wilcox. Brandon is a clairvoyant seer, healer, medium, and teacher. He's done like 2,000 plus readings. He's been in the space of spiritual development for 10 years. He's doing his next round of his program, Align and Heal, August 15th, which is for anyone looking to deepen their connection to their spiritual gifts. We'll link it for you in the show notes. I'm so excited for you to get to know the human behind the healer in this episode. Today, we are talking about Brandon's psychic experiences and spiritual journey. We're talking about cultivating freedom through psychic awareness. We're talking the impact of working energy with psychic healers and clearing patterns and creating opportunities for new growth. Here is your trigger warning that today we're going to be talking about schizophrenia. We're going to be touching on mental hospitals. We're going to be talking about entities, which are just beings. And we're going to touch on some topics that may have some charge to it. But just to be clear, Brandon and I are not licensed medical care providers, and we're not here sharing medical advice or mental health diagnoses or treatment. You can always consult your doctor or healthcare provider. Anything that we're saying is our opinion, and we are not trying to treat or cure any conditions. We're also both not liable for any reactions or outcomes that happen via this content. These are conversations, and they are meant to and will likely bring up some energy. So before we begin, I want to check in with you and see, are you in a grounded place to take in this information? And if not, that's okay. Click off. You can come back to it when you feel grounded in your body and in present time, because this might light up some energy within you. If you're feeling like you want to move forward, I'm really excited for you to listen to this podcast episode. Let's take a deep breath together. In through the nose and out through the mouth, and just let go. Maybe you close your eyes and tune into your feet. And maybe you visualize, sense, or notice a golden cord of light from the base of your spine, dropping effortlessly into the planet. This is a grounding cord. Without getting too intellectual about it, just feeling, seeing, sensing that it's connected to the core of the planet. Give your body permission to ground, to release energy. It's important that we have a grounding cord in, because when our energy field gets lit up, or our pain body gets lit up, we need a place for that energy to move, or else it gets stuck, right? So we drop it to the center of the planet, which I think of as like the human recycling center of all the stuff that's not in resonance with us in present time. So just give yourself a moment, see how that feels to have a grounding cord in. Know that you're safe and you're protected and nothing is going to harm you. Beautiful. There we go. Welcome to episode 3. We're taking it back to what is it like to be a child with psychic gifts. Okay, all right, we're on our journey now.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'm so curious. Let's bring it back to the beginning. How did you know that you were psychic? What was your first experience like?
Oh, that's an interesting question because there's kind of when did I first notice that I was psychic and when did I recognize what being psychic was and put a name to it? Because I think for a lot of people as well, we have psychic experiences from a really young age, and it's not until way later in life that we have any context for it, if we ever get context for it. But to answer your question, I remember being I want to say 3 years old because I remember the house that my parents lived in and they were still together at the time. And so I remember at 3 years old that I would see beings walking around the house. That was something that was always there. You might call them ghosts, entities, various different names, but there'd be people that would be walking around. And one of them, he had kind of like a top hat on and kind of like this trench coat that he would wear. And he would walk around my room as I would sleep, and if I opened my eyes, he would come over and peer in and look at me in bed. And so I was always afraid to get up to go to the bathroom or to open my eyes or like pull my head out from under the covers because he'd come and check on me. And I thought it was really, really bizarre. I remember around that same time seeing uh, colored clouds, but not so much in the sense of colored clouds around people, but more just moving around the house, interestingly enough. There would be what I now perceive as thought forms and emotions that were sort of expressed by the people living there. And then that energy would accumulate in one spot of the house. It was the basement, kind of over by, I think there was a TV maybe. You'd go down the stairs and turn right. And anyway, there would always be all these beautiful colors right there. And I first discovered them because my sister would try to run up the stairs, turn the lights off, shut the door, and lock it so that she could go and eat mac and cheese first before me. It'd be like whenever they said time for dinner and we'd stop playing, that would happen. And I'd remember as soon as she'd turn the lights off, I'd see all these different colors. And it's not the same as like, you're staring at a light and then it's off. It wasn't that type of coloration. It was everywhere, walking around. Um, and then different psychic experiences from there, like I could see what my mom was feeling, what she was going through, and sometimes even those beings would be associated with what she was going through. There would be like anger or some feeling she was having, and there would be a non-physical being that was feeding that anger. It was kind of like living off of it and amplifying it. So I guess around 3 would be my answer.
So cool. So cool. So you were like clairvoyant right then, right there. 3. Oh,
Yeah, to some extent. Yeah, definitely. I didn't realize what it was and didn't really find it too useful because the adults around me would never confirm anything. They would never validate that what I was seeing was there or real. In fact, as I grew up, the opposite happened. When I got a little bit older and could communicate better what was happening, I remember my parents would leave and they'd leave me home alone, and I would call them and say, I can't be here. There's people in the house. There's people that are walking around. Uh, and they would say, you're just making it up. You're just being a baby. If you're scared, go to the neighbor's house, things of that nature. And I was like, no, I'm not scared, but there's people here. And it turned out later on that we found out that there had been some really traumatic stuff that happened in that house, where the last couple that lived there, the wife had been in a coma and she was like
oh God.
living in the basement, and the husband was like cheating on her with the nurse that was taking care of her. And the house was kind of known to be haunted, not in the sense of like really scary things or door slamming or things like that, but there was known to be weird stuff happening in that house that we didn't find out about till later on.
And you were just sensitive to all of it.
Oh yeah, yeah, very much affected me. They would put thoughts and feelings into my mind and body. Yeah, yeah.
Mm. A fun
it,
treat.
it was intense, yeah.
You're like, I grew up in the haunted house on the block, of course.
And the funny part too is that was in my dad's house, and my mom, she was staying with a guy who was kind of a shaman in and of himself. He was a very spiritual person, but the street that he lived on was actually considered so haunted that the police wouldn't go there. It was kind of near Colfax in Colorado, which is at the time it was a very dangerous area, and the cops would not come to house calls because they knew it was haunted.
What?
The one time that they did come, it was because my mom saw somebody in the basement, and her boyfriend had all this really expensive machinery down there. So she called the cops, and the cops look through the window with their flashlight. They see the guy. They walk down into the basement, and all of a sudden they just come up, and they're these big, strong, muscly guys, and they're like kind of shaking, and they're like, "This is why we don't like to take calls here. There's no person down there." And they just kind of storm off.
Oh my God. Was
So,
there a
but
person in there? Like a real physical? No. Okay.
no, not at all. So
Mm.
both houses were haunted in their own right, and I remember that I had these Pokemon cards, and I would sit on the floor and spread them out, and I'd be picking which one was my favorite, and one of the ghosts would come and take it, and he'd put it under the closet door that was locked, and so I'd be like, "Oh, come on!" He would steal them from me and move them.
Oh, come on. Not my Charmander. Why would you do
Yeah, exactly.
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine having that experience. But I also think it's probably vital to your growth in some way, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
wow.
absolutely. It definitely implanted this memory and idea in me that there was more to life than what the adults were telling me, more than
Mm.
what everybody was saying. And there may have been some fear that was installed from that too, because some of them were like peeping toms. They'd like stare in through the windows all the time, and sometimes we'd be in the bath and there'd be a being staring in through the window. And so there was some fear that was installed, but also a deeper curiosity for what's out there. It was sort of a dissatisfaction with the way that things are. And I think that it forced me to actually be on a spiritual journey to seek answers, both in the sense of knowing there was more and in the sense of it causing me some sort of mental and emotional turmoil. And so I needed to find an answer that the world couldn't give me. No therapist was going to give me the answer to that. They're not going to say, "Oh, yeah, here's this being, here's how to remove it, here's how to feel your feelings and your thoughts." No, nobody had that answer as a kid. I was just feeling everybody's stuff, and nobody uh, could explain it or could do anything to help. I remember having a friend when I was in third grade who his parents were in a big fight and they split up. And so he was like sitting on the playground, kind of crying off in his own space. And I remember just from looking at him, all of a sudden I felt everything that he was feeling, and I could see the full image of what he was going through. It didn't make sense in my kid mind. I didn't understand that. But all of a sudden, I remember feeling the exact same feeling that he was having and just totally collapsing in on myself and kind of just laying on the ground, having given up. And it was really interesting because me and that kid ended up having a unspoken connection ongoing through our life, where
Mm.
we ended up sharing a babysitter. We ended up sharing some really pivotal moments in my life. And yeah, it's just a very interesting soul connection that was there.
I love that. I love that. So wow, yeah, super sensitive to energy, being able to read and see what someone's going through and then feeling that in your body. That was probably really difficult for you because you didn't have the tools, to be able to separate yourself from that. So when did you start to kind of take a step toward your spiritual path? I mean, you're a teacher now. When did that start for you?
Well, I would almost think that it had started since I was a young kid, that I was on my spiritual path, and really all of life is part of that spiritual path and learning, and really, lifetimes and lifetimes of it, if we want to go back that far. But in the sense of how you asked the question, I would say when I want to say about 15 years old, I had been seeking higher consciousness and finding answers, and I had been doing it through psychedelics and different drugs that I was trying to get there because it was the only thing that could give me the experiences that were soul nourishing and that made sense to me. And so I had gotten in trouble with that. And I had been court appointed a probation officer. And then that probation officer was like a godsend. It's a really wild story, but she said that part of my being on probation, I had to go and see this therapist. And this therapist is the most amazing lady in the world. She is helping teenagers have alternatives to drugs, different ways to expand their consciousness and to heal and to kind of deal with a lot of these things. And so, anyway, I was sitting in a session with her and she had me close my eyes. And she was sitting there talking, having me do a little guided meditation. And she was a Reiki practitioner. And so she was doing a Reiki symbol and sending it to me. And I had my eyes closed and I was describing to her what the symbol looked like. And she was like, "What?"
Oh.
She was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! What's going on here? Can you draw it for me?" And so I drew it for her, and she showed me a picture of it online. And she's like, "Holy crap! This kid is psychic. He can tell me the images that I'm sending him. He's seeing these symbols." And so there was a lady that she was friends with who was a Reiki master teacher who I believe taught her as well. And she would come and give the kids that are part of this program called Natural Highs, which is the safe space for teens to have an alternative to drugs. Uh, she would come and give Reiki there. And so, me being, ambitious and just willing to ask anyone anything, I was like, "Hey, will you teach me Reiki?" And she's like, "Okay, we can figure out a way to make that happen." And so she started a group for teens to learn Reiki from her. And so actually at like 15, I became a Reiki master teacher. And we started this whole program that continues to this day where that same lady is teaching kids in high school how to do Reiki. And so right from then on, I started teaching it to other people. I started initiating people, doing the breath work and in the ceremony to empower them to be able to give Reiki. And very shortly after that, my troubles kind of continued, where I ended up in sort of a boys sober living home. And there was a psychic who would give readings to all the boys that were in the sober home to see what would be best for their treatment. And when she got to me, she's like, "This kid is psychic and he actually needs training. That's why he's going crazy. That's why he's acting out. That's why he's having all these problems. He can't function in school or around other people because he's just so sensitive." And so at 16, I joined this psychic school in the area that I was living, and I didn't have money to pay for it. So I started working there right off the bat, just doing, like filing paperwork, putting out flyers, processing photos, random things. But I kept studying there for years and years until I became on staff and started teaching psychic tools both there. I also taught some to the sober home that I had stayed at afterwards. I taught at a high school, uh, taught in a few different groups here and there, but primarily started teaching at that psychic institute.
That is so cool. I'm like, so you were kind of coping with your sensitivity with substances, which a lot of sensitive people do. And I love that your probation officer was this human being who really was like, wait, draw this for me. Like you like affirming, like, wow, okay, like you see things. Um, and then you were able to, find the training that was going to support you.
For me, it was almost like not even a choice. It was like I was either going to wake up to my spiritual gifts and learn how to use them and deal with it, or I was going to collapse. I was just going to implode and was just going to cause more and more trouble until I died. So it was both a really beautiful thing where my soul was just so determined to find this information and to get going, but it was also a really painful thing.
Yeah.
But the painful parts of it, I think, have made me a good teacher for other people, and it has given me a really intense motivation to do this work. Like part of my story that I don't talk about is I quit a really promising career to do this work, a career that some people spend 10 years to get into the position to even have that job, and then it's something they hold on to for as long as they can. It's kind of like the dream position in the field that I was in. career wise, and I gave that all up to be able to assist people full time. Whether there's a lot of people I'm assisting or just a couple, it doesn't matter. I know the pain of suffering. I know how hard life can get. I've had many friends take their own lives and
Mm.
drop dead all around me, and there's nothing that's more important to me than people's spiritual and individual freedom and helping them to get past that suffering.
Mm. Yeah, I definitely feel that. What would you share with your 15-year-old self, being in present time now? Like, what would you share with him? How would you validate him and his experience?
Hmm. It's a great question. I think my 15-year-old self really just had a desperate need for freedom in all areas of life. Anything that made me feel contained, controlled, limited, uh, was just very, very hard for me. And so I guess one thing that I would tell my 15-year-old self would be to have patience, and that you can be free within structures that feel really confining.
That is a good one. I,
Yeah, which is
uh,
it's kind of the human journey, right? We're
I'm
these
like matching
unlimited,
pictures.
infinite souls. Yeah. 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 I mean, we're in these bodies that feel very limited. That's kind of one of our first lessons is being this unlimited, infinite soul in this physical container, especially a physical container like mine that early on I had to get antibiotics and be on a home ventilator type thing because I was getting bronchitis and sick all the time. And my gut health got totally ruined by just
Mm.
getting force fed antibiotics as a very, very young person. And so I had chronic pain and stomach issues that I'd be hospitalized for ever since I was a young kid. So just being in a body that was suffering so much, much less the mental and emotional turmoils of everything around me, it's really hard. And so learning how to be free within the confines of suffering would be a great thing to teach my 15-year-old self. 15 is a tough time, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of in a place where you're forming an identity,
Mm-hmm.
and you're forming an identity so that you can then lose it, right? There's kind of the sense of you come in from this source vibration, just this infinite wave of energy that's connected to everything. And then you come into this physical form, so there's a vessel for you to experience your own divinity through, your own abilities to create. And it's kind of like that whole saying of God being able to say hello to himself or be able to meet himself. And so there's this level of where we get conditioned that this is our identity, this body is who we are. They don't look at you, the soul floating around the room. They look at the baby body and say, Gucci, Gucci, goo. And that's where the attention is. And then as you become a teenager, you're trying to form an identity. Well, who really am I? Here's the stuff that I've been told that doesn't feel right. Uh, and there's not anyone who really trusts you to teach you anything. They just see you as a kid. And so nobody's really talking to you or seeing you who you are. You're just this person that's still in developmental phase. And so there's that struggle of trying to figure out what's you. And really, if you're a spiritually inclined being, you'll realize that none of it's you. So the more successful or healthy teen is somebody who says, oh, yes, I'm a musician. I love this musician. Or, oh, yes, I'm an athlete. I just like to play all the sports. And they just accept something as them. They just take it
Mm.
as their identity and roll with it. That's the more quote unquote healthy kid. Whereas a kid like me, none of that's me. I may
Yeah.
be able to do a sport, I may be able to do an instrument, I may be able to do this or that, but it's not who I am. Who I
Mm.
am is so much more than that. And so if there's that conflict of wanting to know who you are, needing to know who you are, you can't just accept this false world and these false hats that we wear. But as a teen, that's what you're trying to do. Who's going to be liked? Who's going to be, who's going to have friends? Who's going to get validation? What's the cool thing to do? What fits in for me? What am I good at? There's all these tough things that we're trying to figure out. So it's a trying time. Plus your body's, you know,
Yeah.
doing
I
all
would
of its
not
stuff
I would
too.
not go back. I have a friend who has a 12, 13-year-old daughter. She's incredible and she's sensitive. And just being around her for like 12 hours, I was like, I would never go back to this. Like it's intense physically as well
Yeah.
as like emotionally. And oh, no, 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 no. I would not go back to that moment. But
That reminds me of the other thing that I always wanted to tell my younger self.
yes.
I think about this all the time as I'm like, Brandon, stop being depressed. You have it so good. You don't have to work very much. You know, you're just hanging out at school. Like, yeah, it's really confining and it sucks, but like, don't waste your time being depressed. It's not going to do anything.
Mm,
I held on to that so deeply and just like wanted to be miserable so badly and just didn't give myself room to experience anything else for a good part of my teenage years. And I see that with other teenagers that I know now. And I'm like, be happy, please. Enjoy
enjoy
it.
it. Yeah, like enjoy it. Like there is of course that like teenage angst of like you want to be sad or like you're feeling your feelings and they're big feelings. Um I was kind of angsty too, for sure. Definitely have uh pictures around control. I also did not want to be controlled in any way. I didn't want to show up for school. I was like, why? What is the point of this? Um yeah, but I've definitely blacked out a lot of my sensitivity until probably around 25 or so. 25 or so. Then I was like, oh, it's on. Oh no.
How did it
so
come back for you? Did that get
so
reactivated by a certain event or?
yes, it was like this big event. My mom ended her life, and she ended her life, and it was this experience of her crossing over through me. It was so strange. It was like I was half dreaming, but I was awake. She had said bye to me, and I was like, huh, okay, this is weird. I woke up in complete peace, and I was like, oh, she's what? Something just happened. Like, I don't know, but you know, it was like immediate turn on connection to mediumship. It was like sensitivity is back. It was like, oh, welcome to your backlog of emotional pain. Here it is. Let's process. I was like, no. So I had a really successful photography career, and I was, helping women, which is something I'm very aligned with still. And yeah, I had to shut it all down to kind of process and move through some of that kind of backlog of energy. And everything just kind of turned on all at once. And yeah, I think it was more because I was numbing it with a lot of things before. Um, Alcohol, people, the things that we numb out our sensitivity with. And yeah, it was a really intense kind of 3-year process. And yeah, now I'm training it and it feels so much better to have, tools to realize that, like, I think most psychic people don't actually think that they're psychic because who could know your experience? So I was like, oh yeah, like I primarily feel and know things. So I would say that my clairvoyance is what I'm training right now because I'm like, oh, there's a lot of stuff in front of that lens. Um, but yeah, it all kind of turned on at once with her passing. Yeah.
That's really cool because, as you know, in psychic terms, we have a term that's called a spirit to spirit hello. And it's when
Mm-hmm.
you're reading somebody and you're in a state where you're tapped into your spirit and you're looking at them as who they are as a spirit. And there's so much around how that simple spirit to spirit hello can be massively healing, massively awakening. And so you literally had a spirit to spirit hello from a spirit on the other side to help remind you of your gifts and everything that's there and to help activate that awakening within you. So that's just really cool.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for it. I have a lot of, um, clarity around her passing. And I feel that I'm like, you know, it's interesting because I feel very grateful to have that connection because it's helped me be able to process some of that emotional pain. Um, yeah. It's
Yeah.
been good. It's been good.
And that's sometimes a really big turning point in, and maybe you see this too and can speak to it, but in some of the clients that I get, sometimes that's a really big turning point in their own spiritual journey is they come in and they have a deceased relative or friend, somebody that they want to talk to, and a message comes through from the other side. And it's something that only they could know, something that only applies to that specific person. And so they get this very real-time experience of, oh, spirit's real, there is life on the other side, and you can communicate to it. So all those mental blocks that would say, oh, it's just black when you die, oh, there's nothing going on there, you can't perceive energy, all of these limiting beliefs that kind of hold those natural abilities that everyone has suppressed, it all starts to awaken. Those spiritual energies start to wake up. And sometimes it's not a deceased person that's coming through. Sometimes it's just seeing them as a soul and them going, oh, wow, somebody who's never met me, who's just talking to me on the phone, not even seeing me. They know so much about me and can describe parts of myself uh, that I haven't, really examined fully for myself. One of my favorite comments I get from clients is, wow, we just covered in 1 hour what I unraveled in 10 years of therapy.
That is my
All the
favorite.
time.
Yes, it's like my favorite feedback. It's like, wow, one session and we just really cleared up what I've been talking about for 10 years. And I'm like, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that mediumship is really special and we all have this ability to connect to the other side, but it was very validating for me to see it, to feel it, to connect with it through that. And I was like, wait, I think I'm a medium. And then it was like boom, 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 boom. Like, oh wait, cool, you are. Um, yeah, I love when my clients give me that feedback. They're like, we've done words. I'm like, mm-hmm. Yeah. And for me, like I was in therapy for so many years. And then I met my energy coach and I was like, oh my gosh, we are really getting into it. In a matter of 6 months, like so much had cleared. I was able to be more in my body. I was able to, create a lot more ease in my life. Yeah, and a lot of growth in ways that were healthy and supportive for me, and not spin myself out for multiple years on one little energy. So really grateful for that experience. Um, but yeah, I love when my clients come back and they're like, wow, this is not therapy. I'm like, it's not, it's energy work. It's my favorite thing. I'm like, yeah, it's different. And for me as a sensitive being as well, like therapy didn't work. It was just me like kicking it up in the mental.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually clearing it or getting to the truth of it or moving it out and getting neutral to it. It was yeah, this process. And then I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, so my whole thing was like, I'm going to diagnose myself, I have all these issues. And then when I had my awakening, I was like, I have no issues. Like there's not one issue. I'm not bipolar, I'm not like, I don't have ADHD. This is all energy. And that's really controversial to say because I think right now collectively we're all, I think most people are very attached to that and creating like an identity around them. And that's okay. Whatever supports your growth. But yeah, for me, um, kind of moving away from psychology has helped me grow so much. And most people be like, oh, like I trust you because you have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I was like, don't. Like
Yeah.
that's not, don't trust me because of that. Like if anything, like I learned a lot, but what I've learned in a clairvoyant training program in a matter of a week is, for me and my soul, so much deeper and so much more potent than spending 4 years. For me, it was like 6 years of writing papers and mentally analyzing things. I
Right.
just, yeah, no, it wasn't fun for me. So
Right.
it was, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like,
I can only agree with the psychology bit. If psychology was uh what I base my life off of, I'd be in a mental hospital. And I was actually when I was, I think, yeah, somewhere in the teen years, I was in a mental hospital. And I remember sitting with well, it's kind of a crazy story. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't go into it. It's a little too, I
I'm
don't know.
I want to go into it with you, but I'm like for the people watching, maybe not. I'm like, let's go to the mental institution and let's
Uh,
blow our fiction. Like, yeah.
yeah, you want a really
Um,
crazy story?
I kind of do, and it's interesting because I'll share with you that 2021, I was clearing a past lifetime of being institutionalized. And that was like probably the most intense energy I've ever felt in my life. I was like getting separated from my husband. I was like, oh, I'm gonna die. Like this is it. Like I'm out. And so yeah, please
Yeah.
share. Let's do it. I'm like, well, we can cut it out if it gets too intense.
I'll just share my perspective of the mental
Okay.
hospital rather than the
Yeah,
crazy
tell me.
story.
Okay, okay. I like it.
Being in the mental hospital enhanced my abilities because they don't have the same mental restrictions that other people do, right? They're not playing by the same rules, speaking to the other people that are there because they're quote unquote crazy, right? So not only are they not playing by the same mental rules, they have their own reality that they're in. But the staff there are sometimes putting out energy of, yeah, you're crazy. There's something wrong with you. And so it just made all of my sensitivities get way more heightened to where I was seeing beings all throughout the hospital. There was another girl there who was seeing them as well. And so we could even talk about our shared experience with them. I was sitting with the psychiatrist, I think it was at one point, and he was talking to me, and my eyes would
Ooh.
go all over because I would see the beings coming in through the hallway and I could see what everybody else was doing that was with me, all sorts of stuff. And so if I had let psychology determine my fate, they would have said, you're schizophrenic. They would
Yep.
strap me to a chair at night and shoot me up with some sort of drug that would keep me from having those symptoms. And so I eventually just had to pretend that I was totally fine and wasn't seeing anything and everything was normal, wasn't going to hurt myself or anything. And so then they would release me uh,
Into the wild.
into the wild.
That one is big for me. The schizophrenia one. Um, I had a friend. Well, first of all, very interesting about the men. Yeah, there aren't those constructs. It's like, oh, you're just crazy, so let's just create like the space for you to just enhance that. Um, Interesting.
Yeah, and one interesting thing I learned of this is a more happy story. When I was around 16, when I was living in that sober home, I got a leave to go to an enlightenment intensive retreat. And there's so many amazing things that came out of that retreat. One of them was that somebody that I was in conversation with, he told me that he had had a breakthrough into an enlightened state. And in that state, he discovered that schizophrenia was a choice. And it was very interesting for me to
Ooh.
hear that because I had schizophrenia symptoms, right? I was hearing voices, they would say my name. It was very audible, like I would have to physically turn and move, seeing things around me, having sort of abnormal fears that didn't really make sense. A lot of the different things that would be considered schizophrenia, and then having a framework for what I was tapping into made it so that it wasn't schizophrenia anymore. It wasn't, here's my reality on this different astral plane, and this is reality, your reality's wrong. There was no fight there. That's the problem. If you're
Mm,
seeing things at a different reality and you're trying to say that your reality is true and theirs isn't, that's when they're going to lock you up. That's where they're going to say you're crazy. But
yeah.
I learned how to tell what I was being aware of and how to work with it, how to manage it. And I was able to step out of that, schizophrenia. And there was another guy there at the retreat who had a similar experience where he had drug induced schizophrenia. He had taken so much acid that he had gone crazy to the point where he had to be hospitalized just so they could help feed him and take care of him. He was so far
Mm,
gone from
mm,
functioning. And he found a way to he describes it as doing a puzzle in his brain and reworked his brain work and pulled himself out of it. The way that the guy that I was talking to described it is a choice. There's this lie in paranoid schizophrenia. You have these voices, you have these visions that are lies. or other realities. And you can choose to feed energy into that to believe it, or you can choose to focus on something else. But if you don't have any framework for what that is, and someone's just telling you, oh, that's invalid, push it away, take this medication,
Mhm.
then you're being suppressed. You're not really healing the issue. You're not really gaining any understanding. It's always going to kind of be there in the background.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely toyed the line with that for sure. I mean, there's been moments where I'm like, lock me up in a padded room because I'm not okay. I'm like, there are so many fucking entities around me. It's
Yeah.
like this moment. Yeah, and that was really scary. I didn't have a frame. So I'm like, have this, only frame I have is this background in psychology. And it's like, okay, Alex, like you're hearing voices, you're seeing things. These voices are fucking intense. And so then it's like the process of coming back to myself, just grounding, you know, finding the tools, being able to, hold my energy space, and things shifted once I started owning that for me. But yeah, there was definitely a very real fear of like, I am going to be institutionalized. And I did everything to fight that. I was like, nope,
Hmm.
definitely not. We're not going there. My mom had been institutionalized for a lot of her life. Like, so when we were growing up, it would be like, oh, she's doing a mental health journey over there. And the mental, so I like grew up going to them. And I was like, this is a no for me. I am
Hmm.
not going there. So
And I think
yeah,
that's where a lot of people are afraid of opening up to their abilities
yeah,
and becoming more psychic or more clairvoyant, is they're afraid they'll see something that'll be scary, or they're afraid that
yeah.
they won't be able to fit into society in the same way. And it's really not like that. Like for me, when I was literally locked in the padded room, it was because the beings were there causing an effect on me that I couldn't control, versus learning to say hello to them. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't scary, they weren't malicious, they weren't, they had died in a state of fear. They had killed
Mm-hmm.
themselves off and didn't know how to clear the pain from their lifetime. And so they're still hanging out in our realm, trying to heal through somebody else. And so, me having a similar pain going through my body, they came and wanted to attach into me, like, oh, maybe I can clear it through you. And
Mm-hmm.
so, being able to give them a simple hello, having some awareness, help me to heal them, help them cross over to the other side, and give me space to not feel crazy. I'll tell you the story. So, when I
Yes,
got there
yes.
to
I'm
the
like,
mental
go
hospital,
in.
the reason they locked me in a padded room was because when I was sleeping at night, I would sit up in my bed, exorcist style, and speak in all sorts of different, like, demonic tones that you cannot humanly make. And so everyone they put me in a room with, because you're supposed to be in rooms of two, was so scared they could not sleep with me. And they put me in a padded room with cameras, and you can see my body almost levitating a little bit
We
as
need the
these things are
footage.
coming in
We
and
need the
out.
footage. We need the footage.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Fuck.
so being psychic doesn't take you to that place. Being psychic and not knowing it can take you to that place.
Definitely. Definitely.
Having tools, having awareness is where you get the power back. Being unaware of something is where it can hurt you. It's like that saying, only what you don't know can hurt you.
Yeah. For me, when I started owning it and I was like, hey, beings in my room, like, what up? I don't have the time. I'm sleeping right now. Please get out. Like, thank you. Come back later. We'll talk to you soon. Um, kind of owning it. You realize that, yeah, like it's just energy. It's not what our horror films have created for us. It's not that. Those are pictures. That's programming. It's very different for me, and I don't see them fully. I see them more as just like energy forms. So it might be different for you. Like you see them very vividly. I'm assuming, yes,
Both
detailed.
actually, because it depends on the quality of the being showing up.
Yeah,
If it's kind of a whimsical ghost that barely was able to get their energy out of their body when they died, they're just going to be a little, sliver of some energy.
sure.
Same for if it's like a thought form related being or emotional energy being, versus if it's a really conscious soul. one that's more developed, then you'll see it like a physical human. So
Mm,
it's a mix. Some of them, they look as physical as you, and some of them look a little
cool.
bit more faint. Yeah, some of them you see with your third eye, and some of them you see with your third eye through your physical eyes, and so
Yeah.
there's a reflection of both going on.
That's what's definitely turning on for me right now is actually being able to see with my physical eyes. Like, no.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, yes, I love this. But I'm like, no. But yes.
Seeing energy with your eyes open can be one of the most beautiful ways to integrate your abilities, because one, beings are so bright and colorful if you're looking at the
Yeah.
energy all around them. But also, you can give that hello to people that can be really meaningful. I had times at the Psychic Institute when people would walk in and there wasn't time to give them a reading, or they didn't have money or whatever, but just from seeing them, I could see certain things around them that was going on in their life, and I could give a little bit of communication to what was showing up. And just that little bit of communication could be so validating, could really help them
Mm.
take their next step forward.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's, something of like, here's some past life energy that you're processing, and that's why you feel like that. Or here's the miscommunication between you and a person in your life, and here's what's going on with that. Or here's where you have your own sensitivity that you don't understand, and this is why people are blaming you and throwing energy at you, because you've have this belief that you have to be a doormat to other people in order to receive love and attention, and so receiving negative attention is the only thing you feel worthy of, and
Don't
stuff
come
like
for me
that.
like that.
And
Like,
there
no. I'm like, hold on. Of course. Of course. I mean, I'm not surprised that match. Yeah, I think that that's really special to be able to see someone and to validate them and to create space for their growth. And um, it's also really exciting for anyone listening. Like it's I mean, Brandon has given me a reading before, a couple of them actually, and it's so validating. And I talk about this a little bit on our first episode, but yeah, the key to me, because I've been to like so many readers. Like when I awakened, I was like, reader, 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 let's go. Um, and there's just something about trained readers, it's just very, very different because there's a neutrality there, versus somebody who's just throwing out all the information. And that was a big reason why I decided to go to what I psychic school. I was like, ooh, let's go. So tell me, okay, what has been your like most miraculous healing for yourself and then like with a client?
That's a
Yeah.
good question. um it's interesting because I almost have had so many experiences now that it's hard for me to remember them. That plus a bout of severe mold poisoning that's damaged my memory. But
Mm.
yeah, that's interesting. So let me think about it. My most miraculous healing for myself. Well, I'll start with the one that happened most recently, and then I'll see if I can think of uh, a bigger one. But I have this nerve pain that goes from my hip all the way up to the top of my head, and it gives me bad TMJ, all sorts of pain, and it even ties into my stomach. And I had a moment where I was aware of a memory from when I was a kid. It
Mm-hmm.
just popped up out in front of me where I could see it. And it seemed like a fairly simple memory. It wasn't like, something you would just think of as super traumatic, but I saw that I had felt really unsafe in my body in that situation. And then I saw where all these moments after that, where I had felt really unsafe in my body, I had stored the energy of that feeling of unsafety in the same spot in my stomach that was tied into this nerve, and I released that energy through a really simple method, and it went away. And all of a sudden, it was like silent in my head, and the whole nerve ending in the stomach, literally in that moment, was totally fine. And I was like,
Mm.
holy cow, I have not felt this not be here in a decade or more. And it was just gone, just like that. Something so simple. It wasn't even some big dramatic story. And it just really, really shifted and cleared up. Okay, I thought of it. One of the biggest healings, and there's a whole crazy backstory to this too that is probably too dramatic to get into, but uh, I had Oh God, I don't know if I can tell the story without the backstory though. I'll say I had an energy that was really affecting me, so much so that I couldn't even speak about it to other people. My voice would clam up and go shaky, would not let me speak, but it was ruining my life. It was what was causing me all sorts of trouble and depression and having me wind up in all these places. And so I was sitting with a guy who's a 32nd degree Freemason, and we were just sitting in his office and we were talking about this energy being there. And he looks at me and he says, "You know, you have the power to just tell it to go away, right?" And it clicked right in that moment that that was a possibility. And this ray of light shines down through the room, hits what seemed like a pyramid, and it shoots across the whole room. And everything went white into absolute just dissolved form all over the room. And his experience was my face shot off across the room out of my body right in front of him. And it took me into this transcended state where there was no thoughts, no feelings. It was just this pure awareness, pure consciousness. And it lasted for like 30 minutes. And then I came back into my body more in an integrated way, and it was gone. That energy that had been plaguing me and causing me all these issues were gone. And then right after that was when I got invited to the Psychic Institute. Right after that cleared out.
Oh,
So that was a pretty
so
wild one.
cool. Yeah, that one's really cool.
It's to kind of play off of that and the thing you said previously about trained psychics being so different. It's like there's some really powerful psychics out there that can read what it is that you want to hear. They can see what your hopes are for the future and tell you something that'll cause an emotional reaction to have you have a big experience with them. Sometimes those really, accurate psychics, they are just plugging into entities that are telling them the information and finding it. But it's not always useful. There's some psychics that are future readers that my friend had, who was like, okay, uh, your car is going to blow up on this day, so make sure not to be in it. And her engine started to stop working, so she pulled over to the side of the road, walked a couple blocks down, and watched her car explode. And so in that case, it was useful. I had a reading from the same lady, and she told me all of these things about me going to India and me having a second child and this, that, the other. Not a single thing has come true. Not a single thing was accurate. She was reading both my desire to travel and my fear of having a second kid. And you can seem like a really good psychic by reading into the things that'll give people a big reaction, versus a trained psychic is going to read what's actually pertinent to your soul's growth. What's
Mm.
actually going to help you take a step? What's the information that you need where you're at? They're not going to give you information that's way beyond what you can hear, what you can handle. They're not going to tell you how you die, or they're not going to tell you some, information about your future that's going to make you always in anticipation. They're going to tell you what you can actually hear and have and what's going to be useful to you. And as you grow and evolve, the better those readings can become. Reading someone like you, it's super easy for you to have big shifts and miracles because you're so open, and you're doing this work yourself and helping other people. And so you can really have a miracle, whereas some people, they can come in and just knowing the energy in their second chakra, what some of that emotionality is and what it means, is where they're at and what they can have. And that's actually useful to them. It's not just telling them, oh yeah, you're going to get cancer and your wife's going to leave you, because I know it's not like that. So having those trained psychics can be a really different experience. Not to totally knock, people that just have a natural gift or are untrained, because there's some beauty and interesting experiences that can come out of that too. Um, I guess the only other thing I wanted to say, to add another level of my own self promotion in here, uh,
We love it.
shamelessly, is
Shameless plug.
I do have my beginner clairvoyant training coming up August 15th. That is
Wait.
for the new babies. That is for how to meditate, how to have psychic tools. I incorporate how to heal, even healing with guides, in this 11-week course. So there are elements of that. And we start to touch into awareness of energy, not in the sense of giving a reading to somebody else quite yet, but in being aware of energy around you and being able to look at energy for yourself. And so it's a really fun, really powerful, super jam-packed 11 weeks. There's a bunch of freebies that come with it, and there's going to be some support from some outside teachers that are amazing to help people through the growth and the process. So it's going to be a really amazing time if anyone wants to join that on August 15th. Or if you're listening to this way after that, I do these 3 times a year, give or take. So you could probably hop on whatever the next one is.
Oh my gosh, I did not know about this. Everyone needs to do this. Yes.
There's my shameless plug.
No,
Otherwise, no, I think we
I
covered a lot
loved
of
it.
great topics. We didn't get
I'm
into aliens yet, so there might have to be a follow-up. But,
this podcast container is like, they're not ready.
We'll
Oh
get
my,
there.
we'll get there. Brandon will be back, I'm sure. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story. It's been really, really cool to get to know you. And like get to know the human behind the healer, you know.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been super fun. You hold such an amazing container. It's very much just feels like hanging out and getting to be and yeah, just getting to talk freely. It's a really cool space that you hold.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Connection, the podcast. We want to remind you that any statements or opinions shared on this podcast are from our own experiences or that of our guests, and we invite you to take what resonates and leave what doesn't. If you love our show and want to connect with us further, please reach out through our website or Instagram linked in the show notes. We're excited to announce our group program Metamorphosis will be launching in the fall. To learn more, please go to alexandriakenyon.com/metamorphosis. See you next time.